Hi, I'm Shari with OLTD. When you think about self-care, what comes to mind? Because self-care sometimes gets a bad rap. People dismiss it as selfish or self-indulgent and say things like, I don't have time to lie around in a bubble bath, drinking wine and eating chocolates. I've got a life, I'm busy, I've got work, I've got my family. So let me make clear that self-care is not all about short-term indulgences like wine or chocolates. Although life is hard and you're not going to hear me knocking on giving yourself a treat every now and then. Instead, self-care is all about setting boundaries and deciding on your priorities. It's about saying no to those things that drain you and saying yes to those things that actually matter. And it's about refueling your energy so that you're actually able to focus on the things that are important. Robin Conley Downs says that self-care is doing the things that make you feel more like yourself. Think about that. It's doing the things that make you feel more like yourself. To do that, it's really helpful to think in terms of 4 categories: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And another way to think about spiritual is in terms of purpose and values. So what that means is that self-care for you is going to look very different than self-care for me, because we're going to come up with different things when we think about what do I want to say yes or no to in those 4 categories. Physical is the easiest one to think about because it's the one we hear most about, and also because it's about our physical bodies that we can actually see. So it's about nutrition and drinking enough water, getting enough exercise, taking our meds when prescribed, getting good sleep. It's also about weighing those short-term indulgences, like maybe binge watching a show all night, with those long-term consequences, like how exhausted am I going to be? Again, once in a blue moon as a rare treat, that sounds really fun. Always, or as the thing I tend to fall back on, probably pretty exhausting. In the physical category, a great question to ask is, how will this make me feel tomorrow? So if I have seconds or thirds of something really delicious, how is it going to affect my energy, my health? How am I going to feel tomorrow? Because of course, being physically healthy is the very first step to even being able to be there for our families, for our work. Closely tied to this concept is the idea of creating healthy habits, because it's really hard to make good choices about food and exercise and sleep when we're already overwhelmed and exhausted by the day. And the great thing about creating healthy habits is that when you have a habit, it makes those choices automatic, so you don't even need to think about that. And we actually have a video all about how to create healthy habits that I'll link below. The second category is about boosting your emotional well-being. Research says that one of the best ways to do that is by connecting with others. So let's say you've been feeling kind of isolated or lonely lately. You might want to focus on strengthening your connection with someone. So scheduling a phone call or a visit, and bonus points if you make it a regular thing so it becomes a habit. Sometimes boosting your emotional well-being is all about saying no, about setting those boundaries around the things that drain us. So maybe not engaging in that political debate, or maybe not hanging out with that person who's like a energy black hole. Have you ever been around someone like that? They kind of suck all your energy away and leave you completely exhausted. So maybe moving away from that person. Social media can be like that as well. It can drain and depress us. So Xing out of that can help as well. It's also about saying no to negative self-talk. So those mean things that we say to ourselves that we would never say to someone else. So maybe you messed something up instead of beating yourself up, ask, what can I learn from this? What could I do differently next time? It's way healthier and more productive. The third category is mental well-being. So reading a good book, learning something new, trying something new, or going somewhere new. Really listening when somebody's telling you about their experiences so that maybe you'll be challenged to look at something in a new way. It's also about saying no to those mentally draining things like constantly checking your phone instead of actually paying attention to wherever you are, which undermines our concentration and is distracting and stressful. And if that's you, if the very last thing you do before you go to sleep at night is check your work messages, and it's also the very first thing you do when you wake up, you grab your phone, you might want to resist that urge, because remember, it's all about creating boundaries that actually restore your energy instead of draining it. So maybe put your phone on Do Not Disturb or in a drawer in another room a couple of hours before you go to sleep. The fourth category is spiritual, and another way to think about that is purpose or values. And that's all about saying yes to the things that are truly important. It's about setting those priorities, which are probably going to mean saying no to some things to create space for the things that you really value. And self-care might be one of those things you decide to say yes to so that you can create more balance and really be there when you're there with the tasks and the people that matter. There was a time when I said yes to everything. I tried to do it all, and I was never home. And when I was home, I was never still until I fell into bed exhausted. And one day my husband came to me and he said, look, I would never ask you to not do something that's important to you. I'm just wondering whether I'm one of those things. So he's a really wise man, my husband. And to this day, I'm so grateful that he said something because, well, for one, I know it was really hard for him. And for another, I really needed to hear that so I could make some conscious choices about how I was spending my time. And that's actually when I began really thinking about what to say yes or no to, and developing the skills and frankly the courage to say no to something so that I could make space for what really mattered to me. And of course, the choices I make in all four categories are going to be different than the choices you make when you think about those four categories. And it's a very individual thing, which means there's not a quick fix to self-care. It's not just about chocolate and bubble baths. It takes some trial and error, and it takes repetition of some things until they become habits. And that's okay. What matters is putting in that effort because it's worth it. Because remember that quote from the beginning. Self-care is doing those things that make you feel more like yourself.